All right. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to, I believe it's budget work session number 4. Judy, let's go ahead and call the roll.
Yes, Housh.
I'm here.
McQueen. Here. DeBoer Leonard.
Here.
Brown.
Here.
And we are expecting Stokes at any moment. Also present is Village Manager Josue Salmeron, Police Chief Burge, Finance Director Amy Kemper, and Public Works Director Johnny Burns.
All right. Thank you, Judy. So just some brief stage setting, and then I think the agenda is kind of similar to what Monday's agenda was from the council meeting. But first of all, I thought it would be good just to highlight a few things around the fact that largely when we've talked about budget, we've always recognized that it's a working document and that things change throughout the year. I support what Amy said around how we should be wanting to pass a budget at our next council meeting and not delay that for a variety of reasons. So remember, a mechanism for things that come up later or maybe we can't all agree on with this initial budget is the supplemental process, all right? So if we decide there are certain things that, you know, again, might be hard to dig into, we have opportunities to add things in the future. With the caveat that I think we've talked as a council throughout all of these meetings that we're trying to really lock down our spending, be as complete as possible, but you know, there are a lot of moving parts for a variety of reasons. So having emphasized that, in my mind, there are kind of two things that seem to be of utmost importance. One is making it clear what we want to see in that final budget for the 19th. And we got a memo from Josue, which we can talk about, but after talking with our village solicitor, you know, I had hesitation about doing formal motions in a work session, so we're not going to do any motions. But we certainly want to leave this meeting with a clear indication about what we want to see in terms of some of the recommendations around wage increases and you know, a variety of other things. And the second thing is, I think different council members have different questions, and so I want all of those questions to be answered. And I think we could do that in the context of, you know, going, well, I don't want to say line by line, but let's say we can look at the different areas of the budget and then focus the appropriate questions for each of those. You know, so that being the general fund, the enterprise funds, and so forth. So that's kind of what I wanted to highlight. I don't know if there are any other sort of agenda-y things that people want to talk about before we jump in. Okay. If not, then, Josue, why don't you start us off with just kind of a quick overview of what you feel the team needs from this meeting to make sure that we're on track for the 19th, and then we'll open it up for questions.
Yep, and I just want to reiterate some of the points on the motions. I put my memo on the motion thinking, you know, there was some confusion about what my tasks were at the last meeting, and we incorporated the things in the budget, and I should have checked with Brian and with Amy Blankenship on the legal things. It's inappropriate to make the motions at this work session, so apologize for if that caused any confusion. However, I think Brian, as Brian noted, we can get to talk about what the expectations are for the next budget that you will be considering on the 19th, so that we can ensure that we have a budget that can be supported by all of council members and we vote something in. Yeah, we're able to start the new year. So in terms of what the village government needs, that's administration, planning and zoning, public works, public safety, all those things, that's reflected in our budget. That we are sensitive to not put things in there that they're not further the vision and mission of the organization. Some of the things that we put in the budget are capital projects that we've been delaying for some time. So whenever we find an opportunity to add a capital project, we put it on there. So like this year, there's 2 big capital projects that we are able to make room for and are just really pressing. $438,000 to re-sleeve or reline sanitary systems. Pricing is just increasing, so we wanna get as much done now as we can with the resources we have, so that we can take advantage of the cost of the pricing that we have secured. The other is an $86,000 water line replacement along King Street. That's $86,000. So those are the bulk of the capital projects, and we see an opportunity to get them done this year, so we put them onto the budget. In the other areas, a lot of our cost is driven by ongoing operation. There are some things that we have some room on, like Mary Ann had asked about the vehicle for public safety. We have that on a schedule, and this year it's time to replace one of the vehicles, so we put it on our capital projects at the public safety with the idea that this is staying on schedule. There are things that may come up. I mean, it's a tough environment to buy a car, but we want to be able to have that in the budget. If we see the opportunity to replace it with an EV vehicle, we would like to have that available so that we can make that necessary investment. So in short, the budget reflects primarily operations, just ongoing operations. The things that you heard about, the special capital projects, we're doing things as they are necessary to do, and we're cost sensitive to all the expenses. There are things that may not be included in this budget that we still try to get done through public assistance. A good example would be the stormwater project that council has approved, the $1.2 million. That work is going to get started in 2023. That is funding that you don't see that expense here because that is state funded. Now, there will be something we need to do because it's a reimbursement grant, so we will need to manage our cash to pay for it up front, and then we get reimbursed, and there's a 21. Water, what did I say? Storm, I meant water. So there are projects like that do not show up in our accounting because that's not money that we control. That's the money that's flowing through us up front. But there will be some activities budget-wise that they're just not going to show up in this budget, but it doesn't add to the overall expense. So in short, if I can I'll get back to the overall budget. A $3 million deficit sounds huge. It sounds alarming. It is not abnormal from a budget perspective.
Are you on a particular page?
I'm looking at the sheet, the consolidated sheet that Amy put together. Amy put together this sheet. It's on the memo. It's behind the page 8. And Amy took the audited financial statements for the last couple of years. Amy, you went back to 2019. So took the audited financial statements and put them on one sheet. And so that way, this gives us a bird's eye view on what has been the deficit budgeting, the budget that has been approved year over year, and what that deficit has looked like. So in 2019, it was a 1.9 deficit. In 2020, a 3.6. In 2021, 2.9 million. In 2022 is 3.1. The 2023 is 3 million. So the 3 million, it's not the highest it's been. It's right where we're close to about the average what has been for the last 3 years. While we are authorized to spend all those funds, we typically don't spend all those funds. And part of that is because we budget to the full extent of the cost that we may incur. A good example is on salaries. When we load our salaries into our budget projection, we load the full expense of a personnel. So if we're going to give an employee a 5% adjustment for a step increase as part of the salary, we budget that expense contemplating that it could happen at the beginning of the year. It typically doesn't happen at the beginning of the year. The timing of it is when their anniversary is up, and it could be in the first quarter, it could be in the third quarter. And so there we don't spend that full expense because of when the timing of that happens. So through the years, we progress through the year. We try to reduce that deficit on the spending side. And on the revenue side, we're conservative. We're conservative because we don't want to overestimate our resources and spend to a higher amount than what we're able to receive. So you'll see how we've been budgeting over the last 4 years in this spreadsheet. And so when we've overestimated our receipts, we're quick to make that adjustment. So a good example of that would be 2019. If you look at the 2019 revenue projections on that sheet, we projected a total revenue of 13.5 million. We've collected only 13 million. And so the following year, we quickly adjusted for that, and there was also when the pandemic hit, and so we estimated our revenues at 12.8 million, and we received almost 13.8 million. So we're being responsive to the changing economic conditions and make sure that we're being conservative on the revenue side. Yes, Marianne?
So I'm looking at what Amy put together and just want to verify.
Mhm.
You look at the general fund,
Mhm.
which is really where we get most of our, setting aside the enterprise fund.
Correct.
If I look at that, the receipts compared to the expenses, oh no, I'm sorry, I was flipping it around. I was thinking we were always taking in more than we were putting out, but I was flipping the.
Okay, yeah.
So our general fund, over these last several years, we've always been spending more.
We've been budgeting to spend more, correct?
But we've spent more than we brought in, both for the general and for the enterprise fund.
And then, and on the budgeting side, over the last couple of years, we've had a couple blessings. We sold Rex, that generated 500,000. We had CARES money come through. We had American Rescue money come through, and so we also have had property sales. So this year we sold the Cresco property. Sold the property to Cresco. That's going to bring us in 270,000. So then we have these one-time revenue activities or resources that help bring us up.
And then I think it's always worth mentioning that there was intentionality around right-sizing our budgets, as I think we have referred to it, and we still do have a general fund that is, I think, healthy, especially compared to most communities, and that's based on that 90-day recommendation from the state, which is why, we have to be very serious about the budget right now, but, we're still looking at another healthy year. We just, we are at the point where we have right-sized,
Yeah.
I think.
And,
So,
and to add to that, how the capital funds came to build such a balance, part of it was that, and Johnny can jump in on this, is the administration was saying that some work was getting done when in fact it wasn't. So there were reports that relining of sewers was being done, and in fact it was not being done. So we were allocating from a budget perspective, we were allocating the budget, but that work wasn't being done. Johnny, I don't know if you want to add to that.
Yeah, it's the same way, it's the same way with the sidewalks. They was saying it was allocated and it wasn't being completed. And so what happened is the finance director took it off the table and nobody knew the work wasn't being done.
mhm.
So we built up some reserves over the year, not for some budget wizardry or genius skills, it's just some of the work just wasn't being done, and that allowed for the accumulation of funds.
And wasn't it like 5 years ago that we started even having capital budgets?
It was.
Okay. Because I remember, I believe it was Melissa that started working on that before she left. So capital budgets are a new thing still.
2017, I believe.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah, and then we said we need to start investing these cash reserves to further our infrastructure and further our business objectives. So that's the big picture. I don't know if I missed anything from the council side, but at least from the administration side, that's sort of been the story that we've been working with.
Yeah. Go ahead,
So-
Gavin.
So that's a good overview. And then I guess the question that Brian asked, I was interested in. So from like the what does the team need perspective, are there, I guess, it seems obvious that you could use direction on the things that you talked about
Yes.
in the memo. I know they're not motions, but like kind of getting, some feedback. Are there any other things that you need for us to be considering today or to get feedback on today?
I think expense-wise, this is it. We have not. There are several other projects that we would want to get done. Are they critical now within the resources that we have? We're not going to add more to this. So in terms of needs, what we have here today presented to you is what we want to start the year with. There may be things that come up throughout the year, but we'll address those as they come up, and that's the supplemental process that Brian mentioned. Over the last 2 years or 3 years, I have been intentional to not bring monthly supplementals as they were once done. Then they moved to quarterly supplementals, and now we move to just supplementals as we need them, but they're not scheduled on a monthly or quarterly basis. So now there are times, like I think in just the last 2 months, we've had maybe 3 supplementals. We had solid waste and the retainer fee, and there are things like that change, and we can bring those at any time, but they're typically budget neutral.
Okay. By the way, as a side note, if anyone's needing to snack, there's some really good pizza that I brought back from Piqua, who, by the way, is doing some really cool stuff that I'll share with you. Sodas, chocolates that I think were homemade and whatnot, so feel free to grab those. So I think it's most important probably to go around with council, make sure the questions are answered, and I guess I'm not convinced that it's necessarily helpful to like isolate them to the general fund or to like special revenue, whatever. So I don't know. I think Mary Ann, Gavin, if one of you guys want to jump in to get started, and then we'll make sure everybody gets covered.
So I have 3 things. One regarding public works, one regarding PD, and one regarding the housing fund. Sorry. So the public works, I would like, Johnny, if you would go over financially the implications of the new hires that I understand you want to make compared to the contract that presumably won't happen. If you could talk about both what that means in actual people as well as finances.
Okay.
Or whomever talked, maybe Amy. or you.
I put together for the linemen to have 3 full-time linemen, qualified linemen, and then 2 for water. What that does is I've reduced the professional services and the contractor services, and over the past 4 years, we've spent almost $400,000 on contractors for just doing high voltage pole replacements. That it's hard for the staff to be able to do some of them because we're also on call for water, we're also on call for everything else. So if you dedicate your time to a pole and we get an emergency call for water in the middle of it, then you got to pick which one you're going to continue to do first. So we've spent with High Tech Electric and with Grid Power and with Midwest, it's, I think, actually I got it wrote down. 439,000, I believe, in the last 4 or 5 years. Yeah, 394,278, and that was without Midwest in there. The other thing, with the wage increase, it will allow us to get dedicated linemen that doesn't want to do water. It's very hard to get somebody that wants to do both, and it's also not right to pay lineman wage for somebody that's doing water. So therefore, you would have a dedicated 2 people to do the water, to get us moving in the right direction of identifying the lines and doing the water valves and doing the water projects. And then you would also have the linemen that could do the dedicated work that the line staff needs to do on a daily basis. Instead of paying $400,000 and only getting 50 poles, by the way, that is only labor only, because we furnish all the material, we furnish all the poles. Sometimes we even furnish the equipment. That's just for them to come do the work. It's $4,000 a day for a contractor to come in. And if we was to have our own staff with 3 full-time journeymen, linemen, or 3 linemen, and then a foreman, you're looking at $1,240 a day versus $4,000. So about 2.5 to 1. Plus you would have them all year long, and they'd be able to get a lot of things done for us, including other projects that we have. Streets is lacking because we're adding storm to that as well, and we're already stretched thin the way it is with doing streets and sewer and parks and mowing all the grass and making sure that all the potholes, the alleys, the sidewalks and all that's done. So we need another person in there to be able to split people up, to be able to accomplish more things and be able to have some people mowing grass and at the same time having people do storm and water and sewer. So I ease the burden of the cost by eliminating a lot of the professional services in some of these items and bringing it in-house. That way we can do more projects with our own staff versus hiring a contractor and then staff just doing little stuff, mowing grass versus replacing the storm line. We need to be able to do that ourselves and save money at the same time.
So is that one for streets, one for water, and two for electric?
One for streets, 2 full-time for water, and then 3 for linemen. But what we're only adding, let me back up.
That's what I mean.
We're only adding one more person in streets, which we actually had this summer because we've not been able to get summer help. So we added another person and he found another job somewhere else. So I wanted to put that back in the budget. So we are adding one for streets, and then it would be basically taking a department of 4 and making it a department of 6. So it'd be 2 extra people in the water and electric. So that's really 3 people to be able to add to public works. We don't need none of the plants. The plants are fully staffed as of December 21st. We actually will be fully staffed back at the plant. There's nothing increased there with the exception of the 2 people that transferred from, one from streets and one from the electric department transferred to the water plant. And we've increased with the longevity. So it's like a $4,000 increase.
And so what is the financial, do you have the financial implications of that?
For the changes that I've asked?
Yeah, the decrease in contract services compared to the increase in.
So the total difference would be $150,000 that I'm adding to the budget
Oh, okay, so.
by adding 3
Increase.
employees. But that's also spread out amongst 3 or 4 funds. What's going to take the hit is the water because we have a lot of work to get done. We're behind the 8 ball. We have a $1.2 million grant that is being done this year, and the guys are going to be hopping. The water guys are going to be hopping. So we got to figure out, are we going to try to do that, or are we just going to wait until a pole falls and dedicate everybody to that one source, which is not fair to the other one because we're always kicking that can down the road. $1.2 million grant. It's going to get a lot of work done, but it's also going to require a bunch of work from our staff. And then on top of that, I'm very hopeful by January 1st, I'm going to be coming back with good news that we may have got the grant for the $1 million water meter project. So then on top of that, then the following year, we would be putting in water meters that can be read from the office and not have to do that out in the field. But fingers are still crossed.
So as one council person, given that we said one of the 2 things that we wanted to have as main goals were increase in infrastructure, I'm comfortable. I mean, I appreciate that. Does anyone else have any
Yeah,
questions about?
I'm sorry if you don't mind, Johnny. Great work. I appreciate all the magic you're doing. Really, this whole process has been revelational for me because it's different to some degree every time, but shifting eggs around to make the basket look better. I mean, when it works, it works. You alluded to the mowing work in the summer and also the struggle with getting part-time people. What do you anticipate happening this summer with regard to
This summer, what I'm anticipating is if we can hire some people at the lower end of the scale and start a training process, they would be on the mowers and the foreman and the lead guys. You may have one lead guy with a brand new mowing guy, and then they'd be mowing. And what we got now, Kevin, is we have all 4 people on a mower 4.5 days a week. And so we literally mow all summer, because if we're not there, we're also at the ball diamonds, trying to get them ready for everybody else. And we don't do anything to the streets, the sidewalks, the storm. That's the reason why I'm having to hire out all the contract work. The grinding, we got the grinding done, but we could be doing some of these sidewalks in town. But the problem is I can't do the sidewalks because we're mowing all the time. And then in the wintertime, now you're plowing snow all the time. Or you're getting the roads ready to be done. We was luckily able to fix the storm on Polecat, and we saved ourselves probably about $45,000 by our staff doing it. Now, we hired the blacktop out, but literally, we got that done, and the bill for the blacktop on top of patching some of the holes was less than $14,000, and everything else was done in-house, which if you was to hire it out, it'd be a $60,000 job all day long.
Right.
But it also gave the guys a sense of, man, we did that.
Right.
The villagers also seen, hey, the money that we're paying, they're out there working. They're not out there just sitting around.
Yeah. You're right, that, it makes a difference. I'll speak from a personal perspective. When I drive by and I see a truck, it makes a difference if there's a YS on
Absolutely
it
it
versus Bob's hole digging. You
Absolutely.
know, no offense to Bob, but it does, and it gives me that sense of ownership that
Correct.
you referred to. So I appreciate that. Thank you. Alrighty.
So in this memo,
Really quickly,
oh yeah, go ahead.
yeah. So, what I wanted to say from a personal perspective is that I have personally seen guys up in the cherry picker and then in a matter of hours on the mower. One of the things that you talked about in our, I think, a budget meeting ago was people doing 2 and 3 jobs and getting paid to do 1 job.
Correct.
With the additional staff, I think that will take care of a lot of that, and it's good personally to kind of start seeing that Public Works is getting the staff that it needs, because I know what it's like to do 3 jobs and
Right.
get paid for 1.
Correct.
Yeah. So it's really very like hopeful and good news to see that,
And
see that
after,
happening.
after the meeting today or tomorrow or Monday, I will send out a memo to council, and I'll send it to Judy as well. Because I have my staff put together just an overview of what they do. And I'll list down how many employees, and you would be amazed at how much stuff the staff does on a regular basis. I mean, it's pages on pages. But it's no different than anybody in the village, I'll be honest with you.
Right.
Yeah.
On that note, that sounded like an annual report kind of thing. Did the word get out to start gathering information?
Well, we worked this morning that it'll be in the second meeting
Okay.
of January.
Mhm.
And we had spoken at a staff meeting that we were gonna advocate for it to be in the second meeting of January.
So just so we're all completely clear related to the memo, so you mentioned effectively it's adding 150,000 to the budget?
Correct.
And so when you say that, you mean from this past year?
Correct.
Okay. And so then that's distinct from the 265,000 number, which, is mentioned as the financial impact.
Let me go through the numbers. In the total cost of the wage adjustments and the personnel that Johnny proposed comes out to $335,000.
Okay. And so let's be clear about whether that's an increase or whether we're comparing
Yes.
that
Yes,
to,
so
but
that-
are we comparing that to a prior number?
No, that's just the new added cost. Now, I'm gonna talk about how we offset it internally.
It's
So-
on page 2 of your memo.
Yeah.
Yeah, all that's clear to me.
So
Like,
we-
my issue is just, I feel like, I don't know if Mary Ann was asking this, but I want to be clear on, compared to this year, what is the effective increase? And then secondly, I want to know that this is also including the, inflationary adjustments.
Yes, it includes pension and all the other things. So the total, The net effect is $185,000 increase to the overall budget
Compared to last year.
compared to 2022.
Okay. I mean, that's enough for me, really. I'm clear on everything else, but that was one thing that was not clear to me is year on year what the change was.
Right.
Okay.
And then we
And then,
have,
can I just ask real quick? We, excuse me, we passed the changes to have the stormwater fees. Are we, I mean, effectively, it seems like we're doing that work in-house. That's where that
Yes.
money goes. Is that true?
yes, so then that gets me to other adjustments that we can do. So we anticipate collecting $100,000 in stormwater fees, of which Johnny has budgeted $25,000 for a stormwater project, that's material and other things. And so we have about $75,000 that we could use to offset all the streets and sewer wages. So then, if we're at a net of $185,000 total increase to the 2023 budget, we've got $75,000 that we could offset some of that expense. So what the expense would be the sewer collection of $24,000. That entire cost could be offset by the stormwater fee. And the reason is because those employees are working in the sewer collection department, which is an acceptable expense item for the stormwater fees.
Okay. And does that 185,000 reflect the 150 that we're offsetting?
Yes.
Okay, so that's after that offset. Gotcha.
Right.
But then, that's what I'm just trying, just to be clear, then is the 75 that's left in streets in that one, in the 150 that is offsetting?
No.
The three, so there's
more.
There's arguably another 75,000, so is there a reason not to make the argument that it's 185 minus 75, so it's really more like 110, given that we have a new dedicated revenue source, and we don't have a dedicated expense that matches?
Correct. And the only reason I can't explicitly say that now, because if you ask me, Josue, where's that
I
75,000?
understand.
I have to show it in the stormwater fund.
Okay. Can I ask one other follow-up on this? So, Johnny, I guess I'm just wondering, like, kind of big picture here. When you think about this proposal, do you think about this and go, this is the team I want? Like, this feels like this is, I know that we were kind of making a larger point, but like, you know, we got 4 people doing 10 people's work. Well, now we got 6 people, you know. I'm trying to get a sense of, is this the kind of thing where you look at this and go, yeah, this feels like we're getting to the level where we've got staffing that can manage the workload? Or are you looking at this going, this is a step, but I'm still concerned?
No, we're talking with the team that I have. Brad's fully taken care of, and now I have Ben and Tanner, and I've talked to them extensively. We feel that this is the team that we need to be able to handle the ongoing projects and to be able to get things done, and to also create a better team and a better atmosphere to be able to say, okay, you can take off because, you know, we got coverage, we can handle. I mean, right now, that's why I'm in uniform, is because I'm literally the one going out and helping them right now, because I'm down to 2 people in the electric and water, and I'm down to 3 in the streets right now.
Okay.
So,
So that's great to hear, and I wanted to ask that before saying what I'll say, which is that this has made me a little nervous, to be honest, because I'm like, this thing around our structural balance has me, you know, I'm trying to figure this out. We've been spending, excuse me, we've been spending more than we've been bringing in. That's okay because we've had more money, but I think I can't remember exactly the words you used, but like, this is the end of that. Like, we're running out. It seems like it's going to be okay for this year, but that everybody's kind of aware that in 2024, without either spending cuts or revenue increases, we're going to start having problems. So I am, of course I want to do this, and then there's the other part of me going, well, I'm nervous about that thing that in a year we got this cliff that's like, we got to either cut stuff or we got to raise revenues. And, you know, we had this joint meeting around these tables, you know, there's school levy stuff going on, that, you know, there's bigger picture here of like, what are the right investments for our village? All that said, I think, so this is getting to your question. We were talking about this earlier. Based on what I'm hearing, I'm supportive of this. I feel good about it. And in part because I guess I look at it like, I'm hoping what this means is you're feeling like you're being heard, that you've got the size staff you need, and that the energy around here can be more positive of, hey, we're really trying to make sure that we've got this taken care of, and that it's not sort of a constant sore spot around whether or not we're meeting the needs of the staff to be able to get stuff done.
Correct.
Okay.
And, I could say one thing. I would rather have staff in-house that we take care of and they take care of the village versus we not having the proper people and paying somebody from Mississippi or Tennessee or somewhere else that doesn't care about our village. We need the people that care about our village to be on our team.
Okay.
Nothing against Kentucky.
So, okay, so I think, unless there are any other questions or comments on this, we've heard from Gavin and Mary Ann that they're comfortable with this coming on the 19th. My questions have been resolved, so I am as well. I can see Kevin nodding, Carmen. Did you want to say anything else on that?
No.
So let's move to public safety.
Okay, so first, I'd like to say I appreciate both Johnny and Paige, the work that you've both done on looking at the staff and the staffing needs. So I appreciate that. And at the same time, I'm not convinced. I will need to be convinced in 2023 that we need the degree of policing in the way that it's being structured. But that's not for this discussion, but and that's me as one council person. What I would like to see in the police budget is that there was a good faith effort made in reducing materials, and I don't think I saw that. For example, Kevin actually suggested maybe not doing a new car this year or not doing some other things. And we saw this whole thing that Johnny went through of all the stuff that he put aside, and I haven't seen that in the PD, and I would like to see that. So, for example, I'm not convinced necessarily that we need a new vehicle this year, or maybe we don't need new
Vest.
bulletproof vests. That's where I'm coming from as a council person. So I guess I want to hear from other council people if that's a concern or your call.
Well, I will say this, when we first talked about the public safety budget, yeah, I talked about the car, because I think it was low-hanging fruit. So I don't mind admitting that. I would submit, Marianne, that Chief Burge's presentation, which, as I said before, was, from a granular level, just built up. I guess the only thing that seemed fluffy, if you will, would be, the number came out to 2.58 staff, and you can't do 0.58. So the fluff is the 0.42 to make it a whole person, and you can't do anything with that. I would submit that there was some consideration from a materials perspective, but I would just say in general, without even going into the nitnoid details, that what I saw convinced me that a good faith effort was done to justify all the expenses. So, like I said, other than what I think of as low-hanging fruit, things that you really could get by with, delaying, I don't think there's really much more change that I'd be looking for.
Okay.
Can I just ask a simple follow-up to Marianne's question? So I remember seeing what you put in when you did your presentation. There's no other document of like, here's what was in the proposal versus what's in the budget right now. So I guess, just to be clear, is what's in the budget right now what was in Paige's proposal? And if not, is there some place where it's listed what was changed?
The former. It's in the budget. So what Paige presented, the ask were two things. There was a capital ask of $94,000. That included the vehicle, the vest, the camera system, and the body-worn camera contribution. So those are the four items. That's included in the capital outlays portion of the PD budget. The other piece that is now included is the $21,000 wage adjustments. So that's now in the budget. No other changes have taken place on the public safety budget.
Okay, plus COLAs.
Plus COLA, yes, and the COLAs were assumptions built into the budget at the very beginning of the process. So you would have received all the COLA adjustments in the November 9th budget version that you received, the all funds.
Right.
The assumption there is 4% COLA, and you had asked, well, what is 5? It's a $26,000 per
Percentage.
1%. So that includes the 4% wage adjustments included in that initial budget. The other assumptions that we made were healthcare costs going up 8%. All those are baked in not baked in, but they're loaded into the budget in the first version of the budget. None of that has changed. The personnel expenses have not changed on the operating side. What we added were the 21,000 for that Paige requested in Johnny's proposal. No other wage adjustments have taken place. Oh, and I'm sorry, planning and zoning. We did include an allowance for planning and zoning up to 6 months, but that one, the more we talk about it, we're gonna reduce that to a more manageable transition time. 6 months is a little bit longer
So-
than we need.
Okay, so I'm just trying to make sure I follow. So what I recall is that we had finance committee meeting. I think it was the only one that was during this process. That what we were assuming was that that was when we were like struggling with the $1.2 million general funds budget. That I was under the impression at that time we were saying what this was basically the police budget was essentially flat. And said, this isn't the budget that Paige had brought,
Correct.
this is the budget that was the same.
Yes.
So then, between that moment and this moment, it changed to being the budget that Paige had asked for.
Correct.
Is that correct? Okay, so why did that happen after the conversation? Like, when did that shift happen?
That shift happened after we were in this room and we had that meeting, and I walked away hearing that there was a majority of support from council to add the $21,000.
Okay, but is the 21, but I'm, the 21,000, so I'll just say, to give one temperature
Yep.
check on this, I'm generally, I think I share some of Mary Ann's points, which is that I'm looking forward to the conversation this coming year about essentially deciding about what the size of our police department should be. And I feel like while our policy is what it is around the size of department that we have and the sort of quality and the safety that we're getting as a result of that, we should pay our people fairly, and the proposals around the how to move the staffing around made sense to me. So the idea of the 21,000 and the COLA increases, I'm comfortable with.
Okay.
So I guess I'm trying to understand the difference between the Paige's budget suggestion and the budget now. I know we're saying there's the 21,000 piece. Are you saying there's nothing else in there besides the 94,000 that's for operations?
Correct.
Okay. And so then it seems like the only question on the table is whether or not we need a new car. And so I guess I wonder, Paige, could you just speak to
Sure.
the necessity or lack thereof of a car in this year's budget?
Yeah, absolutely. So anything that I presented this year on our capital requests is going to be I think I mentioned this in my budget presentation. I completed what I believe to be for the first time a total inventory and review of all of our capital assets. I don't think that's ever been done. And the reason I say that is because I came across many items that were not just overdue, long overdue. And some of these things are not just safety issues, they can be risk issues as well. And what I mean by that is when I found them, I partnered with our risk assessment to determine, like, hey, how big of a deal is this, knowing that we were coming into these budget discussions, and if I had to say, do I put this on this year? Can this wait? How risky that would be. So anything you're looking at in this capital, the reason why your comment, Mary Ann, is that you don't feel there's been a good faith effort is because I came to the table with my good faith effort. I didn't present anything outside of what I felt wasn't 100% necessary. Now, does that mean that we have to move forward with every single one of those things? No, but I want to provide clarity on the fact that if we don't, there is a risk and a safety factor to not doing that. The car. The reason we move forward with cars on the cycle that we do is for a variety of reasons. First and foremost, we're very tough on our vehicles in law enforcement, and that's not because you might think, well, we're not at Dayton, we're not driving around from one end of town to 15, 16 miles on the other. It's not about distance. It's about the constant idling of them, which they have to do. I know there's been discussion about that as well, but they have to do to stay on, to be ready for an emergency. The equipment inside has to be able to be on at all times when we're actively using them. That's heavy wear and tear. Getting in and out of them with all of our gear on often tears the vehicle's interior up, which is not good for officer wellness or actual functionality of the vehicle. I could go on and on. Ohio is a factor. We have salted roads that tear up the bottoms of our vehicles. So that's where the recommendation comes. If we had to wait a year on that, am I concerned about our fleet right now breaking down? No, I'm not. Do I feel that we could wait a year on a vehicle? I do. But my recommendation was, based on all of the things I just said, that it is a high risk to not have the vehicle in there. So I put it in there. As far as the vest, Marianne, that's one of those non-negotiable pieces. The vest request came in because we have expiring ballistics, meaning officers they can no longer wear the ones they currently have. The recommendation from those companies is that, hey, at this point you replace them because we don't warranty that they'll be as effective. Same thing for the tasers. Those were acquired in 2018, partnered with our risk assessment partners on that, and they advised that the internal components, all the electricity and I won't pretend to understand all the inner workings of it, but they are more subject to fail as years go on, and we're over 2 years on replacement on those. I could go on and on. I don't want to waste anybody's time. I think I maybe answered your question already, so I can stop talking. So.
I'll make a comment on the car. As you guys know, I attended the ICMA conference and I engaged Chevy, who's coming out with their first EV police interceptor. And if you've been following what's happening in the new car marketplace, it's difficult to get a car. So even if we have this money in there, we want to have it in there if the opportunity comes that we're able to buy it, we're able to order it and secure it. How likely are we to get the EV vehicle that we are eyeing? And just to be clear, we're thinking an electric vehicle. We don't know how likely that is, but we don't want to eliminate that option now.
So what I think I just heard is, just like your previous point, Josue, there's money in the budget for this. We don't have like an invoice
Right.
to go out and spend it tomorrow.
Right.
But we're just putting the money in the budget. I'm okay with that.
And for us to order a car, we had to come to you guys too.
Mhm. Yeah.
That's anything above 30,000. That's something that comes to council.
Yep.
Okay. Carmen?
Just really quickly, I know that, your budget presentation was great. It was effective. The thing that you presented was like a lot of national data and statistics. I would have liked to seen a focus more on local statistics. We understand that it's a safety issue, especially the vest, but that's kind of a liability issue, especially if they're going to be, so that's a non-negotiable. The car thing, waiting on a car a year can probably happen. Having the money in there, I think, is a good idea. One of the other issues, too, I would like to take a look at over the course of the year is the staffing. I mentioned briefly in the other meeting, if we can get some kind of data regarding when the most activity is, when the most calls come in, how many of those calls require 2 officers to respond to. Is Monday through Thursday a possibility to have a dispatch and then an on-call officer to try to look at reducing some of the personnel cost? The increase, the $21,000 to bring it up to the county or state average, of course, and the retention is also really important.
Yeah.
But those are the only 2 things I wanted to hit on. But we want to get some local data, like with traffic stops and police officers being harmed during traffic stops. Okay, nationally, I understand that's a problem. When was the last time it happened in Greene County? When was the last time it happened in Yellow Springs? Mm-hmm. One of the other issues is that there was some talk about bringing a levy, but one of the things that told me that a levy probably wouldn't pass for for safety personnel, for the police, is because VM mentioned that he didn't think it would pass. That is indicative to me of what the community expectations are. So we need to keep all of these things in mind going forward and over the next year, I think.
Yeah. So you guys were speaking about a annual report. I think I heard that earlier. It's coming in the second week of January, the second meeting in January. Mine is actually near complete. I'll be done with that either by the end of today or Monday. So all the data you requested is already in there, and it's
Okay.
beautiful little graphs. So if there's anything else that you're looking for outside of time of day, day of week, anything like that specific, just shoot me an email, and I'm happy to include that data in the annual report as well. So.
Helpful, thank you.
Yeah, and I think related to that, I mean, when it's done, Chief, go ahead and share it out.
Sure.
And, you know, I think the sooner those are done, we can also give feedback about other things.
Chief Byrd, I just asked now that since you're working on it, did you also do time of year, you know, like a Saturday night in July is different than a Saturday night in December, maybe?
So the way that it's broken down, you're going to have each individual month, and then you're going to have all of the data charted for time of day and day of week. So is it as I think what you're looking for will be visible, but if it's not, always just please say something.
Yep.
I can quickly put together another
Not a
chart.
problem. Great, thanks.
I would like to provide clarity or insights on my statement about a police levy not passing. My statement on that is in no mean an indication of the quality of our public safety service. It's a concern around the how levies are perceived in our community. We've gone 2 cycles where a school levy doesn't pass for schools that are in dire need of basic infrastructure, basic heating, and they have failed. And so my statement is in no way a reflection of the quality of service that we provide. I am extremely proud of our service that we provide.
I'm sorry, I said indicative of the community attitude. I didn't say, absolutely not. I mean, I think that, we're top notch. Yeah, I meant the community attitude or community support of a police levy, not the level of service we provide, not at all. I just want to clarify.
Thank you, Colonel.
So, similar to the question I asked with Public Works, for clarity, and, you know, I want the public to hear these as well, what is the total increase from 2021 to 2020, or 2022 to 2023?
25,000, including pension.
So, okay, so even though there's a capital request of 84,000, it's still,
94.
or 94, there's still only a $25,000 increase?
Well, so the capital 94,000 is a new item, and there's a 25,095, which is wages.
Yeah, I'm
Plu-
clear,
but
I'm
plus
clear on the
COLAs.
wages.
I mean, so
Yeah.
what you're saying, I think we're trying to say, so for instance, when there are people who are looking at the budgets and they see what is the YSPD budget in 2022 versus in 2023, isn't that what you're asking? What is the difference between
So maybe,
2022
and yeah, maybe what's not clear is, I think for Public Works, we were focusing on wages. But now,
Right.
my question is, the total public safety budget, what's the increase between this year and next year?
The 25 plus the 94.
Okay, so that 94, that is an additional on top of?
Correct,
Okay.
correct. And those capital expenses are not every year. So the last purchase of a car was 2 years ago.
Yeah, I remember seeing that report.
But so it's 25 plus 94 plus COLAs,
Correct.
correct?
Oh, COLAs aren't already in there? I thought they
COLAs
were.
already, but that's affected the entire budget from 2022 to 23.
Okay, so it should basically be 120,000-ish then, is that right?
Right, that is.
Can I,
items.
quick question? The 94 is all car, is that
No,
correct?
no, it's
No.
cars, it's the
Okay.
vest, and the
Okay,
tasers.
and what's the car?
The car is.
55.
I'm sorry, I gotta make sure I get this. You're saying the 2022, 2023, the COLAs don't count because they're part of something else, you're saying? They're not, they wouldn't show up? Here, let me just say why.
I know what you're asking. Can I answer?
Yeah.
The COLA's in there. The increase for the wage scale adjustments was done after the COLA was factored into the existing wage.
Got it, thank you. Okay, so then, I have an overarching comment about given that we have this clarity of where the numbers are. So I think we've seen letters about the police department, we've received the petitions. On some level, I want to communicate out to the public to say, at least from my perspective, I feel like we're looking very closely at these numbers. We're having thoughtful conversations about these numbers. There's a series of work sessions that we will have over the course of the year to talk about some of these issues, particularly related to the size of the department. There are other discussions that we'll have. To me, it's not settled. It's a complex thing. I've said before, there's a compelling case for the size of our department as it is, and that we are different from, say, a Cincinnati or a Columbus or a Dayton, where there are massive budgets, big changes that could be made. We're almost at like the bare minimum possible size of something. So this is sort of a political comment just to say we are looking at this closely. I'm supportive of where we're at with it. I would personally like to see the car come out for this year on some level, just as a way to say, I think you're saying you probably won't need to buy it this year. If you need to, let's come in and talk about it. If an opportunity comes up, happy to talk about it later. But on some level, as a way to say, hey, we're gonna need to start making some cuts and making some changes over the course of the year. This seems like a simple one, an easy one, that it's not a big fight over it, to say, let's keep this number a little bit smaller. But generally, the idea of paying our people, fairly when they're here, et cetera, I'm supportive of, and I want the public to know that I think we're all trying to look at this thoughtfully.
So the other question I had is, of the 94,000, remind me how much of that is anticipating body cams?
So
And I know we're going after grants for that, but
Right.
we're setting up the match.
the total cost of body cams is $113,799, and that's over the course of 10 years, not
Right.
just 5. So our upfront cost, signing a contract in the $10,353 range. But I want to kind of caution with that I've already kind of had discussions that price increases are coming. We've been in communication with the company, and so there can be you can see some different numbers. So I don't want someone to say, well, that's not what you said. So we might see some different numbers. So
And we actually might not get a grant this year or
Exactly.
whatever, right? So
Exactly.
that's, okay,
So-
so that's a variable. Okay.
I have another
Yes.
question about body cams. How many body cams are you, or think you need, and why, whatever the number is?
Sure. We requested 10 total body cams for this year. At our highest staffing levels, we support 11 people. However, the 10 body cameras was based on some fluctuations in our changes. Where we stand right now, it allows for us to have enough for each officer at any given time, because we do have many events throughout the year where we have full staff, many events, but also one spare in the event that we have any kind of malfunction or technical issues with those cameras. So there'd be no excuse for an officer to say, well, my body cam was broke. Well, there was an extra. So that type of situation. Does that make sense?
Well, I realize I haven't been fully forthcoming, but sort of water under the bridge. I'm not really convinced we need body cameras, frankly. I mean, I think, I should have said this a year ago or so, but I didn't, you know.
Or maybe 4 years ago when
Or
the
4
task
years
force
ago.
brought it forward.
I'm just, I think the changes that have happened in the police department of decreased pulling people over, decreased citing, also just we just do not have, my sense is there's not a lot of violence in this community, and there's very little violence between officers and the public. So frankly, if I were to roll it back, I would have been more honest and said, I'm not really sure we need body cams. So I wasn't clear whether you just get a few body cams and then you have them on whoever is wearing them, or whether every single person has to have them. So I guess every single person has to have them.
Okay. So, so I want to come back to wrapping this up. Did you have something else, Carmen?
Just really quickly.
Mike?
Really quickly, for the body cameras are there for officers and civilians and community members. Not everyone has the same relationship with police officers as everybody else. Not everybody has the same experience. So those body cameras take out that variable, if you will. Kind of it removes the doubt of he said, she said, or officer said, civilian said. You know, it removes I think that Paige?
Well, maybe before we
Okay.
Yeah,
dig
yeah.
too far into this, I think, like with a new cruiser, if we got a grant, council would have to discuss it. We'd have to approve that we're going to accept that grant and approve the match. So we'll have that opportunity.
And I appreciate what you say, and I agree, and I guess it's just with every new thing, then there are all these rules and regulations and all the more stuff you have to do, paperwork, all the more stuff the officers have to do, and so it's probably sort of like a social workers having to write everything down. And you know, much less time of actually doing the job. I
Yeah,
think.
and the public records request and it being on social media.
Yeah.
Okay.
So,
Um,
can I?
yeah,
do that?
sure.
So, the housing thing.
Oh, wait, no, we want to close this one out.
okay.
Okay. So, I heard Gavin say, take out the cruiser for 2023. I agree with that, and I think in the budgeting plan, or the capital budget plan, I'd like to see it shift to 2024. The thing I will add to that is I'd like to see how more aggressive use of bike patrol could help us minimize the impact on our cruisers. And I know that it was indicated that we're getting more serious about bike patrol, so I would like to see what happens. So that's I guess the budget that I want to see brought back on the 19th. It sounds like that's what Gavin said. Other
I
thoughts?
agree, and even foot patrol. I mean,
Yep.
you know, leaving a car someplace and walking.
Right.
That's not what I heard from Carmen, so we just.
Yeah, we're gonna go around.
Yeah, so I support that. I want to say in theory, but I'll just say I support that. But what we've talked about is budgets are guidelines, and we do have a supplemental process. You know, I'm just, and I'm not just talking about the police car. I'm just saying if we are going to pull something out that we're talking about today, we ought not have amnesia next year when someone presents a need that requires a supplemental, because, you know, we took it out, and whether you're thinking about it now or not, that's probably going to require, you know, supplemental in next year. So again, we should remember that that's what we're doing. So yeah, it looks better if you look at it that way, to take these numbers out to reduce the budget, and that's okay. But it doesn't make the need go away.
And I think that's a good example of something that should be in that annual report, is what the projections for capital needs are, so that we don't forget that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay?
Right.
Oh, go ahead.
While I have the mic, if you don't mind, so Paige, with respect to the body cams, it sounds like we are depending maybe on getting a grant to be able to pull the trigger on that. Before I heard the grant part, I was going to say, in response to your question or your comment about costs potentially going up, just like, so I'm really asking two questions. Johnny's thing about I think it was sewer work, we're talking about doing it now versus 5 years, so I'll just be prepared to say something about that later. Can we sort of get locked in at a certain price point now, and then either spend the money or not spend the money, depending on circumstances?
Yes and no. So what I can do is I can reach out, and this was my intention post our next council meeting, once we know where the budget stands, reaching out to that company and saying, hey, we had the go-ahead, we're going to move forward. Can I get the most recent quote, which is traditionally good for 90 days. I think right now, because they anticipate costs rising in 2023, they're only giving 30-day quotes. So that's why I say yes and no. So I'm still going to wait until Monday after we move forward with budget things, but I can reach out and secure most likely at least a 30-day estimate on that.
Okay, great.
So-
And again, Johnny, I guess, again, while I have the mic, whatever happened to that? Where is that? I can't remember exactly what it was. Was sewer work, and I was proposing paying it over a 5-year period, and made a very good argument for paying it now is going to save us money. Where are we?
Right now, it's still in the Insight's hands. They're trying to negotiate the contract
Okay.
to see if they can give us an extension
Okay.
until
Okay.
July of this year.
Okay.
Let me say one thing about the car. I think if Paige calls about the cars, is, I'm gonna give you the scenario we did with the dump truck. Last year, we didn't have a dump truck in the budget, but when we called to get an estimate for one this year, because ours had failed, they're like, hey, by the way, it's 2 years out, but we actually had a municipality cancel an order, the truck's sitting in our parking lot. It's available at their price, or you can pay another $100,000 and wait 2 years. So I think when you have this in mind, she should still do her homework, because if she finds that same deal, we want to jump on it before the opportunity's missed.
Right, good,
And-
great,
And
thank
we
you.
always listen when those opportunities come up.
And that municipality that gave up that truck, they had actually ordered 2 trucks.
Correct.
And they ordered 2 trucks because they were trying to get ahead of the supply chain, and they knew they could offload the second truck if they needed to, and that's where we capitalized, and we got that truck.
Well, tell them to do it with body cams.
See?
Buy twice as many, buy 10 extra body cams.
All right, so Carmen, to wrap this up, anything?
Oh,
That you wanna-
I don't know. You think, thanks. Sorry about that, but regarding the vehicle, if it is something that can wait, I mean, we have to vote on, council's gonna have to vote on it anyway.
Right.
Then I think we should think about that. I was just saying that, making sure that the wages are increased to reflect the average around here is, that's what I said. I think that's what I said. Okay.
Could
All
I
right.
ask,
All right.
how many police vehicles do we have?
We have 4 total, which, when we have those major events and things like that, that's when you're gonna see all 4 on the road, and we're usually 2 to a car in that circumstance. So we also have a shared vehicle with, no, wait, I have one that I.
You have one?
Yeah, I have one that Florence uses that's not marked or anything like that. It just has, it's just a white SUV, a decommissioned police cruiser, and then my vehicle as well, which is about 175,000 miles on it or so. So,
Okay.
And my decommissioned police vehicle is being used by the water department.
All right. Okay. Housing fund?
Yeah, so, as I understand it, one, thank you for everyone or whoever actually did all the work to get that into the budget, so it's a line. I appreciate that. And presently, it's only being funded, I think, through the non-operator.
Non-owner operated.
Non-owner
Owner-occupied.
operated transient
Non-owner-occupied.
guest lodging unit. And as Denise said, that number, which is like under 10,000, I think, could go down. So I'm proposing that we also fund that line item by some of the income that comes in for the income tax on transient guest lodging, and/or increased in some of the fees that we're charging for buildings and things like that. Both of those line items, I think, are typically ways that affordable housing funds are funded. And I would like to see that fund at $40,000 or $50,000. And I guess I want to ensure that way I've suggested of funding it could be done, and I don't know if Amy has that information or Josue.
Well, essentially, you'd be taking it from the general fund, correct?
Or
planning.
That would be one way. If you recall, when we were looking at the TGL legislation, we identified more ways than the mitigation fee to fund that affordable housing fund. So we didn't continue that conversation, and the other ways were building permits and
Yeah, that-
other assessments. So we didn't continue that work. If you recall, when we did the TGL, the team solved 2 problems with the new TGL legislation. One was that the state wouldn't approve the affordable housing fund without dedicated revenues, and transfers from the general fund didn't count. And so the mitigation fee helped create that dedicated revenue. And then as we looked at other dedicated revenues that could be, there would be new assessments, building fees, that could be part of that.
So can I just intervene for a sec? Before we go too far down this path, does this have an implication for the budget that we're gonna pass on the 19th in your mind? I mean, is there some decision that we would make? Because
I
I
guess it would
think
be-
it's an important discussion for sure. I just wanna make sure we
It
stay.
would be moving some of the income sources into that fund, so.
So that's the challenge, that the state did not approve moving the funds from general fund to the affordable housing fund,
At all or not initially?
not in the initial approval.
But we can do that now.
Can we do that now? I think some of it, just the majority of the funding cannot come from the general fund.
Well, if we move it from the line item of the income tax that gets charged to TGLs, is that considered the general fund if it's
Yes.
coming in? Okay, and then also this is how cities do it. They devote a certain percentage of something usually related to housing into that fund. So I don't,
Right, and so I'm going based on the information that the state told us for their initial denial of the affordable housing fund, was that we were going to primarily fund the affordable housing fund through general fund revenue. And that was not acceptable to them.
Can-
but.
I don't-
But, just a minute, sorry. If we're charging the non-owner occupied units,
Mhm.
and that money goes into the housing fund, well, how is that different than moving money from the income tax that's being charged, the taxing that we're doing for TGLs and putting it in, or from the zoning or the permit fees and putting it in that fund? It's all.
Because legislatively, those charges are dedicated to those funds. So when we collect the mitigation fee, it doesn't go through the general fund and then to the affordable housing fund. It goes directly to the affordable housing fund.
I think what Mary Ann's saying is, couldn't we just change it and make it so that that fund was going over to the Affordable Housing Mitigation Fund as opposed to the general fund first?
Yes, you could rewrite your legislation to do that, yes.
Okay, so I think it could be done. It's not done that way right now, but we could change it to be done that way, and that's what you're asking. Is that, am I understanding correctly? This isn't me having an opinion on it, I was just trying to say, this is doable, it's just the way that
Well,
you
I
set
think
it up.
before we conclude what can and can't be done, we need more. Because what Josue is trying to get at is that these, additional funds, and this is true of our green space fund, they generally are funded by another source. And so, and in general, the lodging fees that are charged, the state has decided they go into a general fund. So it may not be as easy as we can do that, all right? We would need to do more homework on it.
Well, there are cities, any major city in Ohio has an affordable housing fund, and they fund it some way or other, so.
But not necessarily with lodging tax. So, I mean, anyway, there's more to this discussion.
So,
Can I just,
But wait a second.
Yeah.
My understanding is you have balanced this budget with an understanding of income that is coming from these areas. And if we take that income from those areas and put it into a place we did not have before, you now have to rebalance that budget because you don't have that income that you used to balance the budget previously. So we are going into greater deficit.
in the
Is
general,
that-
in the
is that
general
my
fund,
understanding
yeah,
correct?
you'll be taking resources out of the general. fund.
Yes, well, we just said that we're not going to get the police car, so that's whatever it was, $50,000. And so that money could go into whatever the housing fund would remove. It's not a huge amount of money in the scheme of things. But if we're really meaning that we're going to do something about affordable housing, then we have to put some money where our mouth is. Otherwise, let's take that off as a goal, because it doesn't make sense.
Agreed. It's just like we alluded to supplementals, and I'm not saying we're going to commit to doing a supplemental for a housing need next year, but to Marion's point, if we are serious about housing, and I haven't made the bumper sticker yet that says infrastructure and housing, but those are two key areas that we want to focus on. If we have a stated need right now, or whether we have a stated need right now or not, if we're concerned about putting it in the budget, I'm okay. But when a need is present, then that's another opportunity for a supplemental, because it won't be a surprise. I mean, we have indications that there will be a need for us to support an affordable housing effort. So we either put it now or expect to do a supplemental. I mean, or take it off of our goals.
And just to recap on what's in the Affordable Housing Fund, we've collected $9,750.
Mhm.
We expect, based on the projections, we expect maybe $7,000 of collection in 2023. What we put in as an expense is $8,000.
Mhm.
So, right now, we know we have 9,750. Next year, we expect to collect 7,000 at some point throughout the year, and that would take us to about 16,000 with the maximum available resources.
So I'm requesting that we have that fund at $40,000 or $50,000 in that range.
If that wasn't a formal motion,
No, it's not a
but
motion.
I
My-
second that
that's what I am saying I want.
that nice to have.
Okay, so Carmen, Gavin, thoughts?
I guess I'll just say we start out doing the goals and this idea of like with these goals around infrastructure and housing. I guess I would submit that based on what I know about the budget, the main goal is to keep everything going without tanking the ship long term. So I want to do more infrastructure and I want to do more housing. I suppose in theory, and if you remember from the goals meeting, I have a whole bunch of other things I'd like for us to think about doing. But the idea that we have these goals, to me, based on my understanding of what our financial position is that we're trying to do is keep things rolling so that when I think about things like what Johnny's talking about, the wage adjustments that Paige's talking about, I don't think about those as like goals related. I see them as just trying to get us to a point where we have staffing and we have expenses that match the basic operations that we manage. So I say that because I'm not against housing. I guess I would third the request in a world where we have money. In the current world, I would look forward to, in the same way that I've talked about it around policing, I think we've talked about having a housing work session. I'm looking forward to us to getting on the same page about where are our investments, what are the investments that we want to make. And so whether it's supplemental, whatever, I'm open to coming back to it. But at least for right now, I'm kind of in the boat of, honestly, I'm sitting over here feeling like I'm kind of like holding my breath and voting for a budget that has a much bigger deficit than I'm generally comfortable with. Made more comfortable with it by the fact that we underspend regularly and want to ask questions about whether we should underspend so regularly and therefore, anyway. But this is all to say I'm generally in the camp of let's not do a bunch of new things until we have a sense, particularly that our budget's going to be fine in 2024. And as you know, I've asked several questions about this to try to understand where we're going to be in 2024. And I just don't think I understand that yet fully, and I think that's okay. I'm not scared about going into this budget with this deficit, but I'm nervous enough about where the future is that I'm also hesitant to add anything new on. So anyway, that's a long way of saying I think I'm really interested in talking about the affordable housing stuff. I would be disinclined to think, oh, we just took away 50 from here, now let's put it over there, because from my perspective, we were already way over, and I don't want to add any new stuff until we know that we're going to be okay in the future. I would love to make housing a goal, particularly affordable housing, just say it. But I am not comfortable investing in anything new right now until we can get our costs covered and know where we're going for 2024.
Carmen?
I don't have anything to add currently.
But so,
But
where are you at?
I feel the same way. So this is all theoretical. So we took money from over here that we thought we were going to have over here, and then we brought it over here, maybe, possibly. And so, for me, it isn't tangible enough. It's just like thoughts. And I would like some more tangibility, some more concreteness with regard to how the money is being moved around. So, of course, regarding affordable housing, specifically affordable housing, yes, I want that for this community. But I want a lot of things.
Right.
But as it stands, I need to be a little more comfortable with what's actually happening versus what could happen,
Yep.
right?
So I guess what I'll say is I feel like I have been one of the biggest supporters of affordable housing. I and Mary Ann drove having the Affordable Housing Fund and getting some funding source to get that started. But I feel like what we're talking about is, I mean, and it's a major policy change, and not one that I don't necessarily support, but I think it requires more discussion. I don't know that it rises to the level of substantially changing our budget. But I'm also going to say that we've got time to do this next year. I mean, I think there are a variety of sources, including should our green space fund be over 200,000? And I mean, should there be some shifting there? I mean, there's a variety of things to look at. And if we're reprioritizing, I think there are ways to get there. I'm just not comfortable with making that decision right now without more discussion on what our options are. And again, I think if there's an opportunity that comes up, it doesn't have to be in the Affordable Housing Fund. I mean, we can take advantage of that. So that's why I guess I'm also in the camp that I don't want to see that in the budget that comes to us on the 19th, but I do want to talk about it. So, all right. Okay, and I want it to remain a goal. Like, I don't think the reaction is to take it off the goal list.
Yeah,
So-
and when I say, when I
I
hear,
will recommend to take it off the goal, because if we're not willing to commit any significant amount of money, I don't see, I mean, we have said this is a goal, and we haven't, I commend you for Lawson Place, but, and we've given some money to Home Inc., but in terms of any significant, substantial effort, we have not done that.
well, I would advocate keeping it as a goal. If we are committed, I mean, everybody has said some words that sound like we're committed to affordable housing. And I'm just saying, just like we were talking about pulling stuff off and anticipating doing a supplemental in the calendar year 23, let's just have that same attitude. I'm not saying plan a supplemental. It's a goal. If you don't want to put in the budget, fine. But if we're committed to respond to needs that are presented, that's what we should do.
Okay, well, I mean, I think this discussion indicated that there's a lot to talk about, so. Okay, so we've got a little over 30 minutes to try to resolve whatever other questions or issues there are for anyone. Okay, so Carmen's looking like she's good.
Well, cookie, she had a cookie in her mouth. Of course.
But I did see nothing right now. Gavin?
No, I think I've made my overarching remarks in the context of these other pieces, and I guess just to go one step further is just, you know, Josue, Amy in particular, like, I know that I will follow up because I want to understand this better early next year. And everybody, like, I look at, you know, I feel like, let's take the affordable housing piece. I would really like for us to figure out how to invest in affordable housing. In order to do so, as I understand it, we have to find money. And so part of, I feel like, the work in this coming chunk of time is where is their money? So I would kind of, what I'm hoping is that that staff in particular know that we go into this next year with the mindset of, if there's anything that is sort of discretionary extra that's not, you know, that we could do so that we can figure out how to make all these amenities available to a wider, you know, subset of Ohioans, of people, whatever, then we should do that. So just know that my expectation is I plan to dig in on this, to try to understand where we're going for 24, and to look at everything as closely as possible to figure out where are there any dollars that we can save, so that we can invest them in our priorities beyond what I would consider to be sort of the baseline of operating, you know, utilities and whatever as a village. So anyway, that's just, so I guess I'm generally okay with where we're at with those caveats.
All right, Kevin, anything else?
No, I think I'm good. I think I've said what's on my heart and mind.
Okay.
Okay.
Marion?
Yeah, there was one other thing. Have we done a comparison of what we anticipate to spend on legal expenses totally
Yes.
compared to last year and the year before? And can you say what that?
Yes, and the major cost driver for our increase in legal expenses are our solicitor expenses are almost twice as much as they were under a previous model. The other area where we've allocated an expense is in planning and zoning legal. So just in all the subdivision regulations, this year we had additional increases in legal that were driven by that planning and zoning process. Some of it was because we needed to have this outside legal entity provide feedback. I see Judy making head. Some of it was, we couldn't do it all internally for a variety of reasons. This year with the DDC, we've incurred some additional legal expenses, many of which we expect to be reimbursed by DDC. So going forward, we carry on twice as much on the solicitor side of the expenses. The other legal expenses we budget are just things that we expect to be. Planning and zoning, we have an allowance in the police department, that's if we need it. And that's
What
about-
is that we're expecting to?
Do you have that in front of you? It's
spend?
about.
It wasn't much.
It wasn't much, it was like 6,000.
I mean,
I
for
was gonna
solicitor,
say
for the
five.
solicitor.
Oh, the solicitor's 10,500 a month?
Yeah, so it's about 120.
About $120,000 a year.
And how about how much in outside legal expenses this past year
This past year.
that were not, in addition to the retainer that we paid
In
before?
addition to retainer, well, I can pull up the report and I'll send you the report off the top of my head. We had Coolidge Wall sit in on Coolidge Wall needed to review a potential legal action through council. We had the planning and zoning fees, both related to the OBER and to the DDC development. And that's been the extent of our outside legal fees. We didn't have any investigations this year. The police investigation was last year.
Didn't we have some Brickler and Eckler expenses?
Oh, we did. We had some ethics, legal expenses. So the police department hasn't had any this year.
3 weeks.
I'm done for now. Total this year, where is it? Where is it, and what percent is expended?
Sorry, I don't have it pulled up.
The CRB money, right?
The CRB money is encumbered, but hasn't been spent. So there's no expenditure there. I will find it.
And while you're doing that, are we having Amy, our solicitor Amy, we're gonna have to
Amy
have. Come to all of our, remind me of the arrangement, and is there any changes?
2
that we
meetings a
would-
month?
2 meetings a month. No, 2. 1 planning commission, 1 council meeting. Okay, I have the legal expenses up. This is how quick my computer works. For the 2023 budget, we anticipate $156,000 in legal fees, of which 146 are general operating expenditures. That includes our solicitor and the planning and zoning and village manager items. Public safety, we have allocated $5,000 for public safety legal expenses. Year to date, what we spent from public safety and legal fees has been $840.
It's a good year.
Last year in public safety, last year we spent $8,134, and in 2020 we spent $2,359.
And how much of that, or going forward to 2023, is for our solicitor expenses, both budgeted and extra? And how much of it would be anticipated not, an additional legal?
Yeah, just our solicitor, we know it's about 120,000, so of the 146, that's about 26,000 for all the other legal
Oh,
expenses.
okay, it's not her working extra.
Correct, there are things that she can't do, or that needs outside legal counsel. For example, this year, outside legal counsel that we spent, we had the anti-discrimination training that we needed to complete, that I needed to go to as part of this settlement. So we had that piece. That was an expense that our solicitors couldn't do, we needed to pay a third-party lawyer to do that.
And does it feel like it makes sense to continue that, having her come one council meeting a month and planning? I mean, is that needed?
From my perspective, Amy does an outstanding job of anticipating needs and asking what meetings she is expected to attend, and meetings where she would suggest, if she's not there, make sure you touch this or you document this. She just has a different approach to the work. She is not inserting herself in the work. She is ensuring that she has a clear understanding of what is expected of her and what others should expect from the legal side of things. And Brian, I don't know.
Yeah, so I
This
think-
is the triad that
Right.
that coordinates solicitor service.
So I think one thing I think has been really valuable is Amy comes to all the agenda planning meetings. That's under the retainer. And that has been incredibly helpful in terms of just thinking about what we need to get together, and she asks really good questions. So I guess kind of related to what Mary Ann's brought up, is there room to modify the retainer?
Yes, there is.
Okay.
There is, and we included that in the
Okay,
contract.
so I'd be open to exploring, and we had kind of talked about it initially before we tried this out, is, how many meetings were necessary, especially because the meetings are recorded, and, if there is an issue that comes up. So I think getting some feedback on maybe what it would look like for that monthly retainer, if those 2 meetings weren't in there, is a good thing to look at.
So if I understand that correctly, reducing the number of meetings or increasing the number of meetings?
Reducing.
Reducing, okay.
So I think again, maybe it becomes more of a, we need you at this meeting, but I guess it'd be good just to see what the cost difference would be.
Does that affect retainer at all if she does not, we had a month she didn't need to come at all, August? No first meeting, don't need a second meeting, and actually we cancel planning commission, no meetings. Does that drop her monthly or it has no impact?
I think in the current scenario, we would just be swapping that meeting somewhere. So if
she
we asked her,
just plug it in later?
just
Yeah,
plug it in
okay.
later. That's what we've agreed to right now. So there've been months where we needed her at 2 council meetings. We just said, okay, we'll take next month and bring it over.
So if there's like a meeting in the bag, so to speak, somebody's keeping
Right.
track of that.
Right. We have rollover meetings.
Okay, good.
Rollover allowance.
Good. Sound like AT&T or Sprint or something. Got it, they're rollover. Hey, interesting question. If we do all the, the planning and zoning fee increases that we talked about, increases in utilities, various other things, what is the soonest point at which we would see the first penny of any of those changes?
Well, the timing of it, probably Judy doesn't like this, but I think of the outside the box. If you did it as an emergency at next meeting, technically, if you do it as an emergency next meeting, it's
First of the year.
yeah, it's
Technically,
very good.
only if it's an emergency.
Right, only if it's an emergency.
Because
It is.
truly.
Yeah, it's not an emergency.
If it is an emergency, and your costs are that high, and you have got to immediately implement
Yeah.
those fees, you can do that. You can't use emergency to just get a thing quicker.
Quicker, yes. So there's the.
There's a Judy factor.
Yeah, there's lawyers that involve. So, but in terms of a timeline, you would need to properly notice it, give it enough notice. So probably if you queue it up for the first meeting or the second meeting
It
of
already
January,
is.
already is. So then takes 30 days to go in effect after the second reading. By that March, we can.
I mean,
implement the
It's
high
second
fee.
quarter.
There's
Yeah.
nothing wrong with reading it as an emergency 2 reads. That's my recommendation.
Yeah.
That way, you've got.
February, we can
full-
collect.
Full exposure publicly, and it goes immediately into effect.
That has to be the first, if we do it that way, is January 1st meeting, January 2nd meeting, and then
Yeah.
February. Okay.
And 4 of you have to agree.
Mhm. Well, we all do.
So did I also hear you talking before this meeting started about if this body does decide to pursue paid parking, that that's factored into the economic development
Yes,
budget?
so economic development, that is a fund that we had agreed a couple of years back that it would be for economic development activities, whether it's grant writing. It's part of the, it used to fund the seed money for the YSDC, which did so for 2 years, and that was all economic development. And right now, what we have slated to come out of there is the fees for the YSDC, which currently is at $500 a seat, and we have 2 seats on that board. There was a proposal to increase the fee to $1,000 a seat, so that would be $2,000. Out of the $29,000 that's in there, that would be used for parking, pay parking implementation. With Gavin, we had talked about that could be conceptual development for the housing development projects that we had looked at, which initially was Bill Duncan, Corey Street, and other projects. We can do conceptual designs for, on how they fit in the neighborhood so that we can pursue
Affordable.
funding.
Yep.
So,
Let me just jump in there. For anyone who was following what Josue just said about YSDC, there is talk about increasing the fee from 500 to 1,000, but there's also conversation about reducing the size such that we would only have one representative.
right.
So then,
So-
so then it would no longer be, oh, you'd reduce it so you still have the majority, the 40%?
Yeah. We still keep the 40%.
So it's designated.
So cost-wise, it might not affect.
Yeah, I would definitely say, you know, a change like that in fees, I would want to come to council, and I'd want us to approve that. So,
So, I guess it feels like we're generally I don't know, I can't remember if we went around everyone, but I guess now I'm kind of like thinking forward. Is that okay, or?
I think so. We've got 20 minutes.
Okay, I'm just, so Josue just mentioned, this isn't something that's come up in the sort of full discussion, but this idea of we have some land, or we have access to land where we could conceivably build. And so just for whatever it's worth, like I've encouraged Josue, and I think we've all talked about this at some point or another, but the idea of how do we get affordable housing built on this land? So it's one of these areas where like, we're not necessarily talking about some new funding, but there's some funding set aside. And anyway, so just to say there are places where there is still, there's still action that can happen. What I've got down here is paid parking, utility rates, structural balance, reciprocal tax, police size, housing, and growth, which is a conversation that's come up in a couple of that came up in the joint meeting and came up in another meeting prior to that. I'm thinking about these as like big picture conversations that have been started, or it feels like need to start and have some significant discussion around. So I'm just naming those to say, like, as I'm thinking about sort of what I'm hoping we figure out where to spend our time from an agenda planning perspective, those are all topics that come into mind. And in particular, I'm thinking about on these revenue questions, the relationship to the school levies. I think everybody at this point is aware that there's, the numbers are starting to come out, and there is a levy that's expected on the ballot in November of 2023. And so thinking about all of these revenue things holistically for if you are a villager and you are paying, whether it's utility rates or whether, hopefully paid parking will not be something that residents will pay for, but utility rates or reciprocal tax, thinking about how do those things factor into also the potential of a school levy. So anyway, I'm just using this as a chance to name that stuff I'm hoping we're finding time to talk about. Just since I don't know how often we'll get to a place where all these things will be in one place at one time.
Yep. Yeah, I like that summary, by the way, because that's part of 2023 is, kind of looking at those revenue sources and then what's that going to mean, right? We know one's maybe 200 and one's maybe this, and so, yeah. Okay. Anything else? It's okay for us to finish early.
Can we summarize exactly what you want changed in the budget so that we both know? I think what I'm hearing is the cruiser is out.
Cruiser's out.
And then Josue and I had talked about reducing the planning and development coverage from 6 months to 3. So that's going to cut that in about half.
Half.
Yeah.
Good. Yep.
And that's it.
I think that's
we'll-
it.
We'll plan for 3, or at least budget-wise, we'll have 3, but we're gonna shoot for 2.
Good.
That's gonna be our.
Good. Okay. Anything else?
Did you talk about I know you mentioned King Street, but is King Street, is it on, or we just don't come back?
The
later in the year?
86,000 is in this
Okay.
2023 budget,
Okay.
so. Johnny and I talked about the King Street water line. It needs to be replaced. Could we drag another year out of it? Maybe, but we have such a good pricing on it right now that we want to leverage.
We
a-
leveraged a $1.2 million grant pricing and got a better pricing for King Street for that extension.
Why does it need to be replaced?
It actually needs to be added. So when they did King Street up to King's Field, they ran an 8-inch line. So then you gotta go all the way down to Fairfield to get it to Ridgecrest, Keystone, and to Robinwood. And the pressure is so bad at that point that really, the fire hydrants don't even really produce enough water to put out a fire if you wanted to. So we're gonna make that a loop connection to where it will increase the amount of water that can get to that
So
plant.
it's not a replacement, it's
No, it's an
Yeah, it's an
extension.
addition,
that,
Yeah.
Okay.
But that's in there, so we'll move forward with that project.
Great.
Okay, sorry, I'm just gonna say one more thing. So I asked you earlier about sort of this, like, is this getting closer to full staffing? And I guess I'm thinking about when we had our staff council retreat. So just to like, I don't know, I'm trying to like sort of bring it full circle here, and I assume we're gonna do one of those again. I guess I've been involved for only a chunk of this whole last year, but it feels to me like the council's being responsive to staff questions and concerns and needs. And so I just want to name that I think we're trying. I don't know, I don't want to speak for everybody, maybe other people disagree, but I think we're trying. So if there are things that you're seeing in the budget where you're going, well, I'm still not seeing it, I just hope that you feel empowered to keep talking about that. So just to name that out loud.
I feel much better about the budget today than what I did on Monday.
All right. Yep. Okay, well, Johnny, Amy, Paige, Josue, Judy, thank you very much. I think it was a really good session, and seems like we're ready to go for the 19th. So thanks, everyone, and I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Okay, I'll make the motion. All right, we got a second? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Pizza over here. You guys are awesome.
Carmen, I did that recently.
midway.